Grace Carter had lived long enough to know the rhythm of loneliness. Each morning, sunlight crept through the curtains of her modest Kansas farmhouse, casting pale gold across her quilt and the wheelchair she now called home. 76 years old, her hair the color of fresh snow, skin mapped by a lifetime's storms, she had once been a nurse, a woman of action, hands steady under pressure, heart generous to a fault. Now, after a stroke stole the use of her legs, Grace felt herself shrinking, becoming smaller than the big world she had spent so long running toward. Most days, Grace watched from the living room window as summer wind rippled through the empty pasture. The fields that once bustled with the Carter family's horses now lay silent, wildflowers nodding in the breeze. Grace's gaze always lingered a little too long at the old fence line, where memories waited to tug her back. Running with her father's chestnut gelding, braiding manes with her little sister, laughing under a harvest moon. But the past, she told herself, was a locked gate. Her granddaughter Lily, all restless kindness and city ambition, moved in last year after college to help out. But it was hard for two stubborn Carters to share a house. Lily wanted Grace to stay hopeful, to try new hobbies, to let people in. Grace resisted, hiding her ache behind stubborn pride. Each evening, Lily would sit across from her at dinner, the two of them dancing around the quiet, each pretending the other didn't notice how time seemed to be running out. It was on one of those heavy, restless evenings that the thunderstorm rolled in, fast and angry, like Kansas storms always are. Lily was pacing, muttering about flash floods, when the first bolt split the sky, rattling windows and sending the dog scurrying under the table. Rain pounded the tin roof, drowning out everything but the deep, thrumming beat of Grace's own heart. And then, something changed. Grace felt it first. A shiver running up her spine, an old instinct waking up inside her. She looked out the window, expecting to see only the writhing dark of storm and field. But there, just beyond the dying apple tree, stood a horse. Not just any horse, a magnificent chestnut, muscles gleaming even under the curtain of rain, mane plastered to a high-arched neck, eyes wide and unblinking. The horse stood still as a statue, staring straight at the house, straight at Grace. For a moment, it seemed the storm itself paused, the world narrowing to the locked gaze between old woman and wild animal. Lily caught sight of it next, gasping. "There's a horse out there. Grandma, do you see? Should I call someone?" She was already reaching for her phone, but Grace's hand shot out, gripping the armrest of her chair so hard her knuckles blanched. "No, wait. Just wait." Outside, the horse didn't flinch, didn't spook at the thunder. It simply watched, as if it had come for a purpose. Lily grabbed an umbrella and dashed out onto the porch, shouting and waving her arms. "Go on! Shoo! Get out of here!" But the horse didn't budge. Rain poured down, thunder rolled, but still the animal remained, steady as hope, unmoved by anything but Grace's silent presence. Grace felt her heart pounding, memories flashing so vivid she tasted them. Salt of sweat, scent of horsehair, the childhood thrill of freedom on four legs. Something about the horse's proud, stubborn stance, the blaze on its forehead. Grace felt as if the years melted away, like time itself was bending, reaching back. She whispered, You're not real, are you?" The horse pricked its ears as if answering. Grace's chest tightened, the ache so sharp she almost called for Lily, but she couldn't look away. Was this some cruel trick of memory? Or had someone, found its way back to her across all these empty years? The rain battered the world, Lightning lit the pasture blue-white, but the horse never broke its gaze. Lily, frustrated, finally came back inside, dripping and shivering, cheeks flushed. "Grandma, it won't leave. What do we do? It could be dangerous. What if it jumps the fence or—" Grace shook her head, voice trembling. "No, I don't think it's here to hurt anyone." They sat in silence, watching as the chestnut circled the far end of the fence, pawing the earth, always returning its gaze to the window, to Grace. For an hour, nothing else existed, just the beating of her heart and the impossible hope rising in her chest. The storm faded, the world slick with silver, and still the horse stood guard. Lily called animal control, but the line was busy. Apparently the storm had knocked out power in half the county. As night settled, Grace found herself whispering old prayers she hadn't spoken since her husband died. "If this is a dream, let me have it just a little longer." When she finally drifted to sleep, Grace dreamed she was young again, running wild on horseback under a sky split with thunder, laughter carried by the wind. But the next morning, when she rolled herself to the window, the chestnut was still there, waiting, watching. And Grace, for the first time in years, felt the faint, trembling spark of something she thought she'd lost forever, a reason to hope. The Kansas morning arrived crisp and dazzling, the scent of wet earth drifting through the open window. Grace's first waking thought was the horse. Was it real? She hurried Lily through breakfast, barely tasting her oatmeal, eyes flicking constantly toward the field. But there he stood, chestnut coat shimmering in the slanting sunlight, dark eyes fixed on the window as if he'd been waiting all night. Grace pressed a trembling hand to her heart. There was something achingly familiar in the way the horse held himself, proud, head high, one ear twitching toward any sound from the house. "Grandma, are you okay? You look pale." Lily poured more coffee and peered out, wary. "Should I call animal control again? We need to do something. He's not leaving." Grace shook her head. Just let me look a little longer." She maneuvered her wheelchair closer to the window, studying the horse's face, the sweep of white on his brow, the scar along his left foreleg. Suddenly, time collapsed. Grace gasped, breath catching in her throat. "No, it can't be." Lily turned. "What is it?" Grace's voice was barely a whisper. "That blaze, that scar. Lily, I know this horse. Oh God, I think it's Ranger." Lily frowned, confused. "Ranger? Grandma, Ranger's been gone for decades. Are you sure?" Tears pricked at Grace's eyes. "He was my father's horse my whole childhood. We lost him in a flood one summer. I never thought I'd see him again." She pressed her palms to the glass, unable to look away. The chestnut took a step closer, as if recognizing her voice even through the window. Lily bit her lip, torn between skepticism and a growing sense of awe. "Horses don't just show up after 30 years, Grandma. It can't be him. Maybe it's his descendant?" Grace shook her head, tears falling now. "No, no one ever bred him. There was only one Ranger. I'd know him anywhere." Outside, the horse took another step forward, muscles tense but calm. Grace, ignoring Lily's protests, unlocked the front door and wheeled herself onto the porch. Rain puddles glimmered in the sun, but the world felt hushed, every bird silent, every breeze holding its breath. "Ranger?" Her voice cracked. "Is it you, old friend?" The chestnut's ears flicked forward. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, impossibly, he walked toward her, slow, deliberate, each step heavy with memory. He stopped at the porch, dipped his head low, and pressed his velvety nose into Grace's trembling hand. Grace sobbed, the years falling away. She stroked his cheek, the feel so achingly right it hurt. You came back. After all this time. Lily watched, stunned. This can't be happening. She reached for her phone, snapping photos and texting a friend. People aren't going to believe this. Suddenly, a shout rang out from next door. Hey, Grace, is that a horse in your yard? Mr. Pennington, their nosy neighbor, appeared at the fence, eyes wide. Grace tried to smile through her tears. He just showed up, John. He's gentle. Pennington squinted, then whistled. Looks wild to me. Careful, Grace. Sometimes these animals carry disease. You ought to call animal control. Let the professionals handle it. Grace shook her head, stubborn. He's not wild. He's family. By now, other neighbors were peeking out from behind curtains or stepping onto porches. Within minutes, a small crowd gathered, whispering, pointing, pulling out cell phones. The tension in the air grew thick. Curiosity mixed with the familiar small-town current of fear and gossip. Lily sensed it too. Grandma, maybe we should take him around back, out of sight, just until we figure things out. But Grace couldn't move. She was transfixed, fingers tangled in Ranger's mane, heart pounding with a strange, wild hope. A teenage boy called out, "That horse is huge! What if it's dangerous?" Someone else muttered, "Ought to be careful. Old folks can get hurt easy." Grace gritted her teeth. He's not dangerous. He just needs a home. But the murmurs grew louder, and soon Mrs. Douglas, president of the local garden club and self-appointed guardian of neighborhood order, marched up, arms crossed. Grace Carter, you know the rules. Stray animals aren't allowed. That horse could hurt someone or damage property. I'm calling animal control myself. Lily tried to intervene, voice calm but trembling. Please, just give us a little time. He hasn't hurt anyone. My grandma knows how to handle horses. But Mrs. Douglas wouldn't be swayed. I'm sorry, Lily, but this isn't safe. Think of the children. Think of the liability. It's not up to you. Before long, a sheriff's cruiser rolled up, lights flashing. Grace's heart seized with fear as two uniformed animal control officers stepped out, clipboard in hand, voices stern. We received several calls about a loose horse, ma'am. Is this your animal? Grace nodded, tears on her cheeks. He's not loose. He came to me. Please don't take him. He's all I have left. One officer glanced at the crowd, then at the trembling old woman. I'm sorry, ma'am, but we can't have dangerous animals wandering free. You'll need to hand him over until we sort out who he belongs to. No, Grace cried, clutching Ranger's neck. Please, just let him stay. Just give us time. The officer hesitated, uncertain. Lily stepped between them, pleading. Can't you give us a few days, just to prove he's not a threat? The crowd pressed closer, a mixture of concern, fear, and curiosity swirling in the air. Rumors were already flying. Wild stallion, rabid horse, dangerous animal in the neighborhood. Grace, sobbing now, looked at Lily, then at Ranger, feeling the world slip away again. Please, don't let them take him. The officers exchanged a look. We'll have to talk this over at the station, one said, voice not unkind. But you'd better be ready to say goodbye. As they walked back to their cruiser, the sun broke through the clouds, illuminating the horse and the old woman in a golden glow. Two survivors, fighting for one last second chance. To be continued. The tension from the standoff lingered in the house, even after the animal control officers pulled away. The entire neighborhood seemed to buzz with gossip. Grace sat in the parlor, her hands folded in her lap, listening to the muffled sounds of voices outside. The sky was a clear, hopeful blue, but inside, worry gnawed at the edges of her new hope. Ranger stood by the fence, his head lowered, occasionally pawing the earth, as if he sensed the uncertainty swirling through the air. Lily moved restlessly from window to window, peeking through the curtains at the retreating sheriff's cruiser. Her voice trembled as she finally turned to her grandmother. "They're giving us 3 days, Grandma. 3 days to prove Ranger isn't dangerous." She sank into the armchair across from Grace, shoulders slumped. "If anything goes wrong, they'll take him away for good." Grace nodded, her determination quietly burning. 3 days is more than I thought they'd allow, after that circus out there. We'll make it work." She wheeled herself to the door, looking out at Ranger. "He's not just a horse, Lily. He's a piece of who I used to be, who I still am." Lily's gaze softened. She went to fetch a blanket and draped it over her grandmother's knees, then grabbed her phone, already searching for horse care advice. "We need a corral," she said, more to herself than anyone else. "Something safe and sturdy. I'll see if I can find old fence panels behind the barn." Their teamwork began in earnest. That afternoon, under the sun's watchful eye, Lily dragged weathered boards and rusted nails out from the shed. Grace offered instructions, recalling the barn chores she'd done as a girl. They laughed together, the tension easing a little with every shared memory. With surprising efficiency, they managed to cobble together a makeshift corral in the back pasture, using bungee cords, baling twine, and Lily's quick thinking. Grace rolled her chair up to the edge, her face set in a look Lily recognized from her childhood, one of fierce pride and stubbornness. Ranger stepped into the enclosure without protest, as if he understood the delicate truce at play. Lily fetched buckets of fresh water and hay, while Grace stroked the horse's nose, whispering the old lullabies she'd sung decades before. There was a magic to the moment, fragile but undeniable, as if some invisible hand was knitting their small family together again. That evening, they sat side by side on the porch, watching Ranger graze in the dimming light. Grace's voice was quiet but strong. "When I was a girl, this was all pasture and wildflowers. Your great-grandpa kept a dozen horses back then. Ranger was the fastest of them all. Smart, too. Used to open gates with his nose, run circles around me and my sister." Lily smiled, resting her head on her grandmother's shoulder. "You never told me much about your childhood. You always seemed sad when horses came up." Grace nodded, swallowing. "After we lost Ranger, it was like losing a piece of my heart. Your grandpa said I changed. I suppose I did. Life just goes on, whether you're ready or not." They sat in silence, the cicadas humming in the tall grass. At last, Lily asked, "Do you really think this is the same Ranger?" Grace looked at the horse, his chestnut coat glowing in the last rays of sun. "In my heart, I do. Or maybe he's a gift, a second chance," wearing Ranger's face. As the stars blinked awake, the world felt quieter, softer. Lily scrolled through her phone, finding horse care forums and local social media groups. She posted photos of Ranger, describing his gentle nature and sudden appearance. Within hours, replies began rolling in, some offering advice, others asking questions, a few making jokes about ghost horses and miracles in Kansas. One woman messaged, "You two look happier already. Sometimes animals know what we need before we do. The next morning, the new routine took root. Lily woke early, pulling on boots and old jeans, determined to show the officers and the neighbors that Ranger was no danger at all. Grace insisted on helping. She brushed Ranger's coat from her wheelchair, humming softly as he leaned into her touch. Lily mucked the little corral, fed him sweet feed, and double-checked the knots on the makeshift fence. Each task was a small victory, a reclaiming of purpose for both women. Grace felt strength returning to her arms, her hands steady and sure as she braided the horse's mane. Lily, unused to farm chores, grumbled at first, but soon found a rhythm in the work, laughing when Ranger snorted or nudged her for treats. Throughout the day, curious neighbors lingered by the fence, some peering cautiously, others snapping photos. A few even approached, asking questions about the horse and how Grace was doing. "He's beautiful," one young mother admitted. "I thought you'd be frightened after your accident." Grace looked her in the eye. "He's not here to hurt anyone. He reminds me that I'm still alive, still part of this world." That night, as a breeze rattled the shutters, Lily watched her grandmother moving more freely, her cheeks flushed with energy. She realized, with a pang of guilt, how much she'd underestimated Grace's will to live fully, even now. Before bed, Grace called Lily into her room. "Sit with me a while," she said, patting the edge of her bed. "Let me tell you about the first time I rode Ranger bareback. I was 12, stubborn as a mule. He was wilder then, but I trusted him. We raced the wind across these fields, faster than I ever dreamed I could run on my own." Lily listened, eyes wide, swept up in her grandmother's stories. The joy, the sorrow, the lessons learned through years of loving and losing. For the first time since moving in, she felt like she truly belonged, not just as a caretaker, but as family. Outside, Ranger dozed under the stars, the steady thump of his hooves in the soft dirt, a lullaby older than memory. And inside, 2 generations of Carters quietly made a pact. For as long as Ranger stayed, they would do everything in their power to hold on to hope and to each other. Morning light spilled gently through the lace curtains, catching on the dust motes that floated in Grace's room. She stirred before dawn, something she hadn't done in years, listening for the sounds that now shaped her world. The creak of Lily's footsteps, the faint whicker of Ranger in the corral, the hopeful stirrings of a new routine. For the first time since her stroke, Grace awoke not to resignation, but to a flutter of anticipation. Life, it seemed, was calling her back. Lily yawned and stumbled into the kitchen, her hair wild and her t-shirt rumpled. She found her grandmother already at the table, hands wrapped around a mug of tea, eyes bright. The silence that had once hung heavy between them was now alive with quiet purpose. After a quick breakfast, they set out together, Lily pushing Grace's wheelchair over the rough ground to the makeshift corral. Ranger lifted his head, mane glowing red-gold in the early sunlight. He let out a soft nicker, ambling over to meet them. Grace's hands trembled as she reached for the brush, but her strokes soon grew confident, muscle memory taking over. She hummed an old song as she worked, her voice cracking at first, then finding its strength. Lily handed her a bucket of sweet feed, watching with awe as Ranger ate from Grace's palm, gentle and trusting. They worked side by side, tending to Ranger with a devotion that surprised even themselves. Grace began insisting on doing more each day, mixing feed, cleaning the water bucket, even attempting to help muck out the corral from her chair. At first, Lily was nervous, hovering nearby, but she quickly learned that her grandmother was far more capable than she'd let on. Sometimes, Grace would bark out instructions, her nurse's voice resurfacing. "No, tighter on that knot! Horses are clever, Lily. They'll test every inch of your work." Lily found herself laughing more than she had in months. The chores became a dance, her hands working alongside Grace's, their voices rising and falling in easy conversation. They talked about everything: old family stories, school, lost loves, the pain and hope that came with every new day. The work grounded them, drawing them closer with each passing hour. Soon, caring for Ranger was more than a necessity. It was a lifeline. The act of feeding, brushing, and talking to him became sacred. Sunrise and sunset bookended their days. In the morning, they'd greet him together. At night, Grace would wheel herself to the corral for one last whispered conversation, her hand on Ranger's warm muzzle as the stars blinked overhead. The changes in Grace were unmistakable. She began her physical therapy again, using Ranger as both motivation and reward. "If I can get through these exercises, I'll have the strength to brush him myself," she'd say. She pushed herself harder, holding her posture straight, flexing her arms, even trying to move her feet with new determination. Her therapist, surprised by her sudden progress, called Lily to marvel. "Whatever you're doing, keep it up. I haven't seen her this lively in months." Lily was changing too. She dove into online communities, horse forums, Facebook groups, even TikTok pages devoted to second chance horses. She posted photos of Grace and Ranger, their story unfolding in real time for hundreds of strangers. Advice poured in from across the country. Tips for older horses, encouragement for novice handlers, recipes for homemade fly spray. Some locals even reached out, offering to donate hay, build a better corral, or simply stop by and visit. One afternoon, a teenage girl named Mia from down the road knocked at the door, shyly holding out a bag of apples. "My mom saw your story online," she said. "I ride at the stable outside town. If you ever need help, I'd love to come by after school." Grace smiled, genuinely touched. "Thank you, Mia. Ranger loves apples, almost as much as he loves company." Neighbors began to notice the changes in Grace. The quiet old woman who once kept to herself was now often seen outside, chatting with visitors, laughing with Lily, waving to passing cars. People stopped to comment. "You look good, Grace. That horse is working miracles. I haven't seen you out and about like this in ages." But not everyone was pleased. Some cast wary glances at Ranger, muttering about the risks. Mrs. Douglas, ever the worrier, stopped Lily on her way back from the grocery store. "It's nice to see your grandma smiling, but you have to be careful. Big animals can be unpredictable. What if he escapes? What if someone gets hurt?" Lily, emboldened by her grandmother's progress, stood her ground. "He's gentle. We're being careful. And he's given my grandma something no one else could: hope." Despite the whispers, most of the town watched with cautious admiration as Grace's health steadily improved. Her cheeks flushed with color, her laugh returned, and her posture grew more upright. Lily kept filming their daily routines, recording everything from early morning feedings to late-night story sessions. The footage captured something special: the transformation of a family, the revival of a spirit, the unexpected gift of a second chance. Each evening, after chores were done, Grace and Lily sat together on the porch. Sometimes they were joined by new friends: Mia, a curious neighbor, or someone who'd seen their posts online. The small gatherings grew into a ritual, laughter echoing across the pasture as the sun sank low. One night, as fireflies danced in the dark, Grace looked at Lily, her eyes shining. "I thought my life was over, Lily. I really did. But you and Ranger, you both brought me back." Lily squeezed her hand. "We brought each other back, Grandma." In those moments, surrounded by love, laughter, and the quiet strength of a horse who'd appeared out of nowhere, Grace Carter no longer felt like a ghost at the edge of her own life. She was living again, braver, bolder, and more grateful than ever before. And every sunrise, as the first light painted the fields gold, she knew that healing wasn't just about walking or moving or even surviving. It was about hope, connection, and daring to believe that some miracles, no matter how unlikely, were meant just for her. The routines that Grace and Lily built with Ranger became the heartbeat of their days. But life in a small Kansas town is never just about what happens behind your own fence. Word of the mysterious horse and Grace's transformation had spread far and wide, stirring both admiration and anxiety. Not everyone was convinced that hope and healing were enough to outweigh the risks. It happened one brisk morning when the sky was a high, cloudless blue. Grace was sitting by the corral, humming softly while brushing Ranger's mane. Lily, sipping coffee nearby, scrolled through messages on her phone, some encouraging, others warning her to be careful and think about the neighbors. It was so peaceful, Grace nearly forgot the world beyond their property. But suddenly the calm shattered. A dog's frantic barking exploded from the yard next door. In a blur, the neighbor's German shepherd, a big, boisterous animal named Rex, burst through a loose board in the fence and tore across the pasture straight at Ranger. For a moment, time slowed. Ranger snorted, rearing back, eyes wide. Grace's heart thudded in her chest. "Lily!" Grace tried to shout, but her voice caught. Lily leapt into action, grabbing a rake and rushing toward the chaos. Rex darted at Ranger's heels, barking, trying to herd the much larger animal. Ranger, more startled than angry, spun and danced along the edge of the corral, avoiding the dog's snapping jaws. Grace gripped the fence, terrified the old horse might crash through, or worse, injure himself or the dog. "Rex, no!" The neighbor, Mr. Evans, came running, arms waving frantically. "Get back here! Bad dog! Get away from there!" Lily managed to wedge herself between the animals, waving the rake and yelling. Rex hesitated, then finally turned away, tail between his legs as Evans grabbed his collar and dragged him home, muttering apologies. The damage was done. Ranger's sides heaved with fear, and Grace could feel her own hands trembling uncontrollably. Within minutes, the spectacle drew a crowd. Neighbors gathered along the road, some concerned, others simply eager for a bit of excitement. Mrs. Douglas arrived, voice shrill as ever. "I told you this was a bad idea. Someone could have gotten hurt. That horse needs to go before there's a real accident." A few people murmured agreement. Others just shook their heads, uncertain. The tension that had hovered in the background now surged forward, threatening to sweep away the fragile peace. Lily stood by Grace, face flushed. It wasn't Ranger's fault. He's been gentle since the day he arrived. Rex got loose, that's all. But the doubters were louder. "A horse that big doesn't belong in a neighborhood." Next time it could be a child instead of a dog. This is about safety, not your grandma's feelings. The next day, a notice appeared on the town bulletin board. Community meeting. Urgent, discussing the safety of Grace Carter's horse. The message was clear. Some wanted Ranger gone for good. Lily's hands shook as she read it. "They're making it public, Grandma. They want a vote." Grace closed her eyes, feeling the years pressing in again. Heavy and cold. For the first time since Ranger's arrival, fear began to erode her hope. She remembered the loneliness before, the emptiness that had filled her days and nights. She wasn't ready to go back. As the day of the meeting approached, the house felt tense, haunted by the possibility of losing Ranger forever. Lily tried to reassure her, but Grace saw the worry etched into her granddaughter's face. "I'm sorry, Grandma," Lily whispered one evening. "Maybe I should have listened. Maybe this was all too much." Grace squeezed her hand. "No, Lily. We can't give up. Not now. Not when we've come this far." That night, Lily posted a long message online, sharing Ranger's story, how he'd helped her grandmother, how he'd brought their family back together, how much he meant to them. She included photos and short videos of Ranger nuzzling Grace, of neighbors visiting and feeding him apples, of children giggling at his soft wicker. She ended with a simple plea. "Help us show the town that Ranger deserves a second chance." The response was overwhelming. Some comments were critical, but most were filled with support and encouragement. Local news picked up the story, running a short segment about the miracle horse of Willow Springs. Messages of hope and love poured in, people offering to speak at the meeting, some from as far away as neighboring counties. Finally, the night of the meeting arrived. The old town hall was packed, standing room only. Grace insisted on going, her first time out in public since her stroke. Lily pushed her wheelchair up to the front, surrounded by friends and strangers alike. When Grace spoke, her voice was soft but unwavering. "I know some of you are afraid," she said. "I understand. I was afraid too. Afraid of getting hurt, afraid of losing again. But Ranger isn't just a horse. He's a part of my past, and he's given me a future I thought I'd lost." She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of people she'd known for decades. "We all deserve second chances. Me, Ranger, even this town. Please don't take away the hope he's brought us." The silence that followed was thick, expectant. Then, one by one, voices rose. A local teacher, a teenage girl, a neighbor who had once been skeptical. Some spoke in favor of keeping Ranger, others against. The town was divided, tension simmering just beneath the surface. Afterward, Lily's phone buzzed with notifications. Her posts about Ranger were spreading quickly, sparking debates across social media. Some commenters called Ranger a hero, others called him a danger. The whole town, it seemed, was holding its breath, waiting for the verdict. Back at home that night, Grace sat with Lily in the dark, the old woman's hand wrapped tight around her granddaughter's. "Whatever happens," Grace said, "we fought for him. For hope and for each other." The fight was far from over, but for the first time, the Carters realized they weren't alone. 3 days had come and gone, and the outcome of the town meeting still echoed in every corner of Grace and Lily's home. Although support for Ranger had grown, the loudest voices of dissent lingered in the air. It was on a gray, wind-whipped afternoon that the official letter came. A final notice from Animal Control, taped to the front gate by an officer who didn't even knock. Lily found it first and read it aloud, voice flat. "If Ranger is not relocated to a licensed facility by the end of the week, he will be removed by authorities and placed at Tall Oaks Sanctuary." She lowered the paper, hands shaking. "They're giving us 5 days, Grandma. 5 days." Grace felt as if the world was slipping out from under her once again. She pressed the letter to her chest, willing her heart to steady. But her body betrayed her. That evening, as she reached for her water glass, her hand trembled so badly it slipped from her grasp, shattering on the kitchen floor. She slumped in her wheelchair, breath coming in shallow gasps. "Grandma!" Lily rushed to her side, panic flashing across her face. Grace tried to smile, tried to reassure her, but the exhaustion was too much. Her vision swam, memories rushed back. Hospital corridors, bright lights, the helplessness after her stroke. She clung to consciousness, determined not to let this new blow defeat her. After settling Grace in bed, Lily called the doctor, who reminded her what to watch for and advised rest. But rest was impossible. Grace's mind churned with worry, guilt, and a desperate, aching need not to lose Ranger. Not now. Not after everything. The next day, as rain hammered the windows, Grace sat quietly, staring out at the sodden field where Ranger stood with his head bowed against the wind. Lily tried to be strong, researching sanctuaries and legal options, but her voice betrayed her every time she spoke. "Maybe Tall Oaks isn't so bad, Grandma. They take good care of their animals." Grace shook her head, her voice faint but fierce. "That horse, he belongs with us. He came back for a reason. I can't let him go, Lily. I just can't." Tension simmered between them, neither wanting to give voice to their darkest fears. Outside, the sky grew heavy with clouds, and a humid stillness settled over the house. Grace's anxiety gnawed at her, and Lily found herself snapping over little things, the pressure building until even their morning routine felt brittle and strained. On the third night, a thunderstorm rolled in, fiercer than the last. Lightning flashing like camera bulbs on a red carpet, thunder rattling the windows. Grace lay in bed, listening to the storm's rage. She could sense something was wrong. She sat up, her chest tight, dread crawling up her spine. A sudden, frantic pounding at the back door shattered the tense silence. Lily threw on a raincoat and hurried outside. "Grandma, stay inside!" she shouted, but Grace stubbornly wheeled herself to the window, eyes wide. Lightning lit up the corral. Empty. The gate hung open, its latch twisted loose. Ranger was gone. "No!" Grace's voice was ragged. She ignored Lily's protests, forcing herself out onto the porch, the rain plastering her hair to her cheeks. "Lily, he's gone." Lily's face was pale in the flashes of lightning. The storm must have scared him, or maybe the latch gave out. Without a word, Grace pushed herself down the ramp and into the night. The wheels of her chair bogged down in the wet grass, but she didn't care. "We have to find him," she gasped. "He could be hurt. He's out there alone." Lily hesitated, torn between obeying her grandmother and the urge to keep her safe. In the end, she threw on boots, grabbed a flashlight, and ran to her side. Together, the two set off across the pasture, calling Ranger's name into the howling wind. It was a harrowing search. The rain came down in sheets, turning the world to mud and shadows. Every sound was magnified. The crack of branches, the distant bark of a dog, the pounding of their own hearts. Grace called out, her voice hoarse, refusing to be left behind. At one point, the mud nearly trapped her wheels. Lily pushed and pulled, grunting with effort. Desperation in every movement. "Come on, Grandma, don't give up. We'll find him. We have to." They checked every tree line, every hollow and ditch, the flashlight beam slicing through the darkness. With every minute, hope ebbed away. Grace's body ached, her fingers numb, but she refused to stop. Her memories swirled, the horse she'd lost once before, the daughter she'd failed, the granddaughter she was terrified of letting down. As the storm raged on, the two women clung to each other, united by fear, grief, and a stubborn, unbreakable love. At last, exhausted and soaked to the skin, they collapsed beneath a willow tree at the edge of the property. Grace buried her face in her hands. "I can't lose him, Lily. I just can't." Lily wrapped her arms around her grandmother, rocking her gently as the storm began to pass. "We'll find him, Grandma. I promise. We're not done yet." In that moment, with the wind moaning through the branches and the world around them battered but unbroken, Grace and Lily's bond shone stronger than ever. The night was long, but they held on to each other, two souls refusing to surrender, no matter what the dawn might bring. The thunder faded into a low, rumbling grumble as dawn crept across the horizon, painting the wet Kansas fields in shades of blue and silver. Rain still pattered softly on the leaves, but the worst of the storm had passed. Beneath the battered willow at the edge of the property, Grace Carter and her granddaughter sat in exhausted silence, the night's ordeal written in the lines of their faces, their mud-stained hands clasped tightly together. Grace's arms ached, her shoulders burning with fatigue. Her hair was matted to her forehead, and the thin blanket Lily had wrapped around her shoulders was soaked through. Yet even now, as her body begged for rest, Grace's eyes never stopped searching the field and tree line, desperate for a glimpse of Chestnut among the shadows. Lily checked her phone. No missed calls, no messages. It was still early. Most of the town was asleep, oblivious to their struggle. She looked at her grandmother, voice raw. "We need help, Grandma. I can call Mr. Evans. Maybe the sheriff, too." Grace shook her head, stubborn even in her exhaustion. "We'll find him, Lily. He's out there somewhere. He always finds his way home." She let the sentence trail off, unable to say what lingered between them. That hope, after all these losses, sometimes felt as fragile as spun glass. But Lily squeezed her hand, summoning a smile she didn't really feel. "We'll find him," she echoed. They started searching again, Lily pushing Grace's wheelchair along the rutted edge of the property, flashlight still in hand. Dew beaded on the grass, and their breath curled in the morning chill. The world was washed clean, the air heavy with the scent of wet earth and wildflowers. At the far end of the Carter pasture, near a stand of thick oaks, Grace spotted something, a flash of movement, a shimmer of red against the green. Her heart leaped. "Lily, there!" she whispered, pointing with trembling urgency. Lily strained to see, then she gasped. "It's him! Grandma, it's Ranger!" But Ranger wasn't alone. As they drew closer, they saw a small, shivering figure huddled beneath his neck. A child, filthy and terrified, clutching at the horse's mane as if it were a lifeline. For a moment, neither Grace nor Lily could move. Then instinct took over. "Stay here," Lily said, sprinting across the muddy field, sliding to her knees beside the child. It was little Joey Ramirez from 3 houses down, a curious, quiet boy with a mop of brown hair and shoes that always seemed too big for his feet. "Joey, honey, what are you doing out here?" Lily asked, voice gentle as she checked him for injuries. The boy's lips trembled. "I got scared," he whispered. "The storm was loud. I ran out of the house, but then I got lost, and I couldn't find my way back." Grace called out softly. "Ranger found you, didn't he?" Joey nodded, burying his face in the horse's wet flank. "He stayed with me, He kept the monsters away. Lily's heart ached with relief and gratitude. She wrapped her arms around the boy, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You're safe now, Joey. Let's get you home." Ranger, calm and steady, stood watch as Lily lifted Joey into her arms and carried him toward the road. Grace rolled alongside, never taking her eyes off the horse who had, once again, done the impossible. As they reached the edge of the property, neighbors were beginning to gather. Word had spread fast. A missing child, the Carter horse loose in the storm, the Carters searching all night. Mr. Evans, Mrs. Douglas, and even Officer Bradley arrived, confusion and concern etched on their faces. When Lily explained what had happened, the crowd fell silent. Ranger stood tall and proud beside Grace, ears flicking, dark eyes full of gentle intelligence. Joey's mother raced across the street, scooping her son into her arms, sobbing with relief. "Thank you. Thank you both. And thank you, Ranger." Mrs. Douglas, who had once been so loud in her protests, stared at the horse with new awe. He protected Joey? All night?" Grace nodded. "He's not dangerous. He's a guardian. He's always been that way." The townsfolk murmured, the mood shifting from fear to wonder. Someone snapped a photo. Another whispered, "Maybe we were wrong about that horse." Mr. Evans, his dog now safely on a leash, muttered an apology to Grace and Lily. Officer Bradley stepped forward, voice softer than usual. "Grace, Lily, I'll be filing a report on this incident. But I think the whole town can agree. Ranger saved a life last night." Grace's cheeks glistened with tears. "He saved more than that, officer. He brought us back to ourselves." Someone handed Grace a megaphone, and she realized the whole neighborhood was watching, waiting. She steadied herself and spoke, voice quavering but powerful. "I spent a long time thinking my story was over, that there was nothing left but waiting. But sometimes life gives you a second chance, in the most unexpected package. Don't be afraid to accept it. Don't be afraid to fight for it. Faith and hope. They come back if you make room for them." For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then applause broke out, hesitant at first, then swelling. A sense of unity, of community, hung in the air, something that had been missing for too long. By midday, the Carter property bustled with visitors. People brought flowers, food, homemade treats for Ranger. Even those who had signed the petition for his removal came by, awkward but sincere, to thank Grace and Lily. Children lined up to pet Ranger, who accepted every touch with calm patience, as if he knew exactly what this day meant. That evening, as the sun set in a blaze of gold and lavender, Grace sat on the porch with Lily at her side, and Ranger dozing nearby. The house, once haunted by loss, was now filled with laughter and light. For the first time in years, Grace allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, the past didn't have to define the future. A neighbor's voice drifted over the fence. "You're right, Grace. Sometimes what we fear most is the very thing that saves us." And as darkness fell, the Carters knew the fight wasn't quite over. But whatever happened next, they would face it together, strengthened by the miracle that had galloped into their lives on the tail of a storm. The morning after the storm and Ranger's heroic act, the Carter home buzzed with the energy of a town on the edge of transformation. The story of how Ranger had protected Joey had spread through Willow Springs like wildfire, turning former skeptics into tentative believers. For the first time since Ranger's arrival, people knocked at Grace's door not to complain or warn her, but to offer help, thanks, or simply a word of kindness. Still, a shadow remained. The deadline from animal control loomed large. The officers would be returning to make their final decision. If the Carters couldn't prove that Ranger was safe, loved, and supported, he would be taken to Tall Oaks Sanctuary by week's end. Lily refused to let fear paralyze her. She rose early, phone in hand, fingers flying as she organized a petition, drafted emails, and set up a page on the town's social network. Let Ranger stay. A second chance for Grace and Willow Springs, she wrote at the top. Within hours, neighbors and strangers alike began signing, first in a trickle, then a flood. Dozens of messages poured in from parents, teachers, shopkeepers, even the local minister. Ranger saved a child. He saved our neighbor. Let him stay. Grace watched with pride and gratitude. She spent her mornings with Ranger, as always, brushing his coat and talking to him. But her routine was interrupted again and again by visits. Mia, the teenager from down the road, brought a stack of homemade flyers. Mr. Evans arrived with extra lumber to reinforce the corral, an unspoken apology for his earlier fears. Even Mrs. Douglas appeared at the gate, bearing a pie and an awkward smile. "I was wrong, Grace," she said quietly. "We all were. If you need help convincing animal control, I'll stand with you." The support gave Grace strength, but the fear never quite left her chest. She knew the officials would be under pressure to enforce the rules, and there were still a handful of voices calling for the law to be followed, no exceptions. That uncertainty made each hour feel like a test. Lily filmed videos of Ranger with Joey, with Grace, with the children from the neighborhood, every clip a testament to the horse's gentle spirit and the healing he brought. She posted testimonials from neighbors and shared before and after photos of Grace, her transformation visible in every smile and upright posture. "This isn't just about a horse," she said in one video, her voice steady but passionate. "This is about hope, about what community means, about how second chances can change everything." On Wednesday, a local news crew arrived, drawn by the story's viral spread. They interviewed Grace on her porch, the sun slanting across her face as she spoke about loss, love, and what it meant to welcome the unexpected. "I spent years waiting for the end, thinking I'd already lived the best days of my life," she said. "But Ranger taught me that sometimes the best days are still ahead, if you're brave enough to reach for them." The broadcast ran that evening, and the response was immediate. Strangers sent letters, donations, and photos of their own rescued animals. Some drove from neighboring counties just to see Ranger, to meet Grace and Lily, to add their names to the petition. When the animal control officers returned on Friday, the front yard was crowded with supporters, old and young, newcomers and lifelong residents, teachers, firefighters, and families. Some wore handmade shirts with "Let Ranger Stay" painted in bright letters. Children held signs and bouquets of wildflowers. The town had turned out in force, their message loud and clear. Officer Bradley stepped forward, clipboard in hand, his partner scanning the assembled crowd. He looked at Grace and Lily, then at Ranger, who stood quietly with Joey's arm slung over his neck. "Mrs. Carter," Bradley said, his tone more gentle than official, "we're here to review the situation one last time." Lily approached, hands trembling but voice sure. "Officer, I have a petition here with over 200 signatures, letters from local doctors and teachers, and video testimonials. I have proof that Ranger is safe, cared for, and loved, not just by us, but by this whole community." Mia stepped up, holding her flyer. "I've known Ranger since he came. He's never been anything but gentle. He brings us together. Please let him stay." Mrs. Douglas cleared her throat and stepped forward, voice loud and unwavering. "I was wrong about Ranger. I judged too soon. He's not a danger. He's a blessing." The officers took their time. They inspected the reinforced corral, reviewed Lily's stack of papers, watched the videos and news segment on a borrowed laptop. As they worked, Grace sat with Ranger's muzzle in her hands, whispering quiet encouragement, heart pounding with each passing minute. At last, Officer Bradley turned to the crowd. "We've seen what Ranger means to Willow Springs. We've seen the outpouring of support and the proof that he is safe and well cared for. The decision isn't ours alone, but I will be recommending to the authorities that Ranger remain right here with the Carter family as a symbol of second chances for this whole town." The words hung in the air for a heartbeat. Then applause erupted, laughter and cheers filling the yard. People hugged, cried, clapped each other on the back. Lily dissolved into tears, clutching Grace and Joey. Ranger pranced in a small circle, tossing his mane, as if he knew he'd passed some final unseen test. Later that evening, the mayor called for a public vote. Nearly every resident attended. When the results came in, it wasn't even close. Unanimous. Ranger would stay, not just as the Carters' companion, but as Willow Springs' own town mascot. Under the stars that night, Grace held Lily's hand and listened to the sounds of celebration drifting on the breeze. Music, laughter, the soft whinny of a horse who had changed everything. She closed her eyes, overwhelmed by gratitude. For the first time in decades, she felt not only safe, but fully alive, wrapped in the arms of her family and her town. She whispered into Ranger's ear, her voice trembling with joy. "We did it, old friend. We found our way home." Summer deepened in Willow Springs, the days now longer and filled with possibility. The storm and its aftermath became local legend, retold on porches and in coffee shops, with every retelling casting Ranger's courage in a new, brighter light. For Grace Carter, the world felt changed. She was no longer just a watcher at her window. She was a part of the story, and her life, for the first time in years, was defined not by loss, but by the vivid colors of hope, community, and second chances. The town's official vote to let Ranger stay had brought a gentle joy to the Carter household. Each morning, Grace woke to the sound of hooves in dew-wet grass, the low, friendly whicker that now felt as natural as her own heartbeat. She and Lily established new routines, chores and stories and laughter, all underscored by the knowledge that what had once been broken was now mending day by day. Grace spent long hours on the porch, sipping iced tea, her gaze drifting over the pasture. Sometimes neighbors would stop by just to say hello or to let their children feed Ranger carrots and apples. Ranger stood proud and calm for each visitor, his presence a reassurance that healing was possible, not just for Grace, but for anyone willing to believe. With Lily's encouragement, Grace began to write again. It started as small entries in a weathered journal, memories of her father's farm, stories about Ranger, and little notes of gratitude. But it quickly became more. Lily convinced her to share some stories on the local community page, and the response was overwhelming. People who had never spoken to Grace before now sent her messages, thanking her for reminding them that even the hardest seasons could turn. One Saturday, Grace and Lily decided to give back. Together, they planned a small community thank you day at their home, a celebration for everyone who had supported them, for everyone who had opened their hearts to Ranger's story. They made invitations, baked pies, and mowed the yard with the help of a neighbor's teenage son. The day dawned bright and clear. Tables lined the edge of the pasture, covered with homemade food and flowers picked from the Carter garden. Kids chased each other through the grass, and Ranger, groomed and gleaming, became the star attraction, posing for photos and accepting hugs with gentle patience. Lily set up a display, a timeline of photos, news clippings, and social media posts, tracing Ranger's journey from mystery horse to town mascot. People lingered over each picture, recalling their own moments of doubt or joy. Many confessed how the story had touched them, inspired them to reach out to neighbors or take chances they'd been too afraid to consider. Grace stood before the crowd as the afternoon sun dipped low, her voice steady and warm. "I used to think life's greatest lessons came in youth or triumph," she said. "But I've learned more from loss, from fear, and from the courage it takes to start over when you least expect it. Ranger brought me back to myself, but it wasn't just him. It was all of you. This town gave me a second chance. I hope, if you ever need one, you'll remember that it's never too late." Her words rippled through the group. Even Mrs. Douglas, once the harshest critic, blinked back tears. The teacher from the elementary school stepped forward with a gift, a framed collage of drawings made by the children, all showing Ranger, sometimes flying, sometimes with a golden crown, always with Grace by his side. Lily's own transformation was just as profound. She found herself opening up to new friendships, inviting people in, trusting her own instincts. She learned to recognize her grandmother's quiet strength, to lean into the moments of vulnerability instead of hiding from them. Over countless cups of coffee and hours spent mucking out stalls, she and Grace built something rare and lasting, a friendship that spanned generations, rooted in honesty and love. Late that evening, as the last guests lingered and fireflies began to dance in the long grass, Grace and Lily sat side by side on the porch steps. The sky was a tapestry of stars, the air humming with the sounds of summer. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" Lily asked softly, voice tinged with awe and gratitude. Grace smiled, reaching for her granddaughter's hand. "All the time. If I'd given up, if you hadn't come to live here, if Ranger hadn't found us, so much would be missing." Lily nodded, eyes bright. "I'm glad we didn't let fear win." Grace gazed out at the silhouette of Ranger, grazing quietly in the moonlight. "What I've learned," she said, her words as soft as the breeze, "is that life keeps offering us second chances, if we're brave enough to take them. We may not get back what we lost, but we can find new reasons to hope, new ways to heal, and new people to love." For a long time, they sat in comfortable silence, content in the knowledge that their story was now woven into the fabric of the town, a story of faith restored, wounds healed, and love that grew stronger with every test. As midnight approached, Lily pulled a worn blanket over their laps and leaned her head on Grace's shoulder. "Promise me something, Grandma?" "Anything. That we'll keep fighting for hope, that we'll never stop trying, no matter what comes next." Grace squeezed her hand, her voice a whisper of certainty. "I promise." In the glow of that promise, surrounded by the warmth of a town that had learned to believe in miracles, the Carters watched the moon rise over the pasture, grateful, changed, and ready for whatever sunrise might bring. The morning light filtered through the curtains in gentle gold, carrying the promise of another new day. Grace Carter sat by her bedroom window, wrapped in a hand-knit shawl, listening to the familiar sounds of Willow Springs awakening. She could hear the distant rumble of a truck, the chirping of robins in the oak, and clearest of all, the soft whicker of Ranger waiting patiently just outside. Every sunrise felt like a miracle now, as if the world was continually inviting Grace to begin again. She wheeled herself to the back porch, where Lily was already bustling about, setting out mugs for coffee and slicing fresh peaches into a bowl. The simple ritual was sweeter than ever. Ranger approached the fence, his mane catching the sun, eyes bright and attentive. He nudged Grace's hand over the railing. She stroked his nose, smiling, her heart swelling with gratitude and wonder. The town had embraced Ranger as one of their own. Children brought wildflowers and painted pictures for him. Elderly neighbors stopped by just to lean on the fence and talk about old times. Even tourists sometimes drove out from nearby towns, eager to meet the famous horse who had become Willow Springs' mascot and symbol of hope. This morning, the Carters were preparing for something special. Today marked the first annual Second Sunrise Festival, an idea born from Grace and Lily's gratitude, meant to celebrate the power of community, second chances, and the beauty of new beginnings. Lily decorated the yard with strings of colorful paper lanterns, while neighbors brought folding chairs and tables loaded with pies, lemonade, and platters of fried chicken. By midday, the field was full. The mayor gave a short speech about how a single act of courage, Ranger's protection of little Joey, had helped transform not just one family, but the entire town. Mrs. Douglas, now a dear friend, organized the children in a parade around the pasture, their laughter ringing out under the wide Kansas sky. Mia brought her guitar and played songs while Ranger stood calmly in the shade, surrounded by admirers. Grace watched the festival unfold with a feeling she could hardly describe. For so long, she had felt defined by what she had lost: her health, her independence, her old life. But now she saw that every loss had been an invitation to open her heart again, to accept help, to risk loving and being loved, even as time slipped by. After lunch, Grace called Lily to her side. "Help me out to the field, sweetheart. I want to be right there, next to Ranger, when I talk to everyone." With Lily's steady support, Grace crossed the yard, every eye turning to follow her progress. The crowd grew silent as she reached the little wooden platform set up beneath the apple tree. Ranger came close, his head bowed beside her. Grace took a breath and looked out over her friends, family, and neighbors. "I've spent many years thinking about endings," she began, her voice steady, the Kansas wind carrying her words. "I thought my life was winding down, that my days of meaning and purpose were over. But I was wrong. Life is not a single sunrise, it's a series of them. Sometimes the sun dips low, and we feel lost in the darkness. But if we wait, if we trust, the light always returns." She paused, meeting the eyes of those who had once doubted her, of those who had rallied to her side. Ranger came back to me in the twilight of my years. He reminded me that love doesn't leave us forever. Sometimes it returns in a new form, asking us to be brave enough to change and to welcome the unexpected. Lily squeezed her hand, tears glinting in her eyes. Grace smiled and continued. "This community reminded me that none of us are meant to walk alone, that healing is a gift we give each other, not just ourselves, and that it's never too late to be part of something bigger than our own sorrow." The crowd was quiet, some people dabbing their eyes, others holding hands, everyone feeling the weight of Grace's truth. Today, as I watch the sunrise with all of you, I know that my life is not fading, It's blooming again, in ways I never could have imagined. Ranger's story isn't just mine, or Lily's, or Joey's. It belongs to all of us. It's a story about faith, about forgiveness, about fighting for what matters and opening our hearts to miracles, no matter how old we are. A gentle breeze stirred the lanterns overhead. Grace looked down at Ranger, then back at her neighbors. Thank you for giving us a second chance, for believing in hope, in love, and in the power of coming together. Applause filled the air, warm and sustaining. Children swarmed Ranger, who accepted each hug and apple slice with calm patience. Lily wrapped her arms around her grandmother, both women beaming. That evening, as the sky blazed with streaks of orange and violet, Grace lingered outside long after the last guest had gone. The world was quiet except for the distant song of cicadas. Lily joined her, pulling two rocking chairs side by side so they could watch the day's last light together. They didn't need words. Their hearts were full, with gratitude for the struggles that had shaped them, for the horse who had bridged the past and the future, for the family and community that had grown stronger, not in spite of difficulty, but because of it. As darkness deepened, Grace spoke softly. Her words meant for Lily and for herself. Even in the dusk of life, the sun can rise again. And somewhere in the hush of the prairie night, the lesson settled in. Sometimes, what we've lost returns to us in a new form. And sometimes, the miracle is not in getting back what was taken, but in finding the courage to change, to welcome hope, and to let love lead us into the dawn. If you enjoyed our story, please like, follow, and share this channel. Remember, hope and second chances can come in the most unexpected packages, and they are always worth fighting for.